Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this triple row wirework bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So there's 3 rows of beads next to each other, or the middle one is a bit on top of the others. And then you have wire crisscrossing over each other all the way around. And you have some macrame at both ends. And then you loop and hook for the security. So if you want to learn how to do that, then keep watching. Now to make this bracelet, these are the things that we'll need. The first thing we'll need is our wire. And for this bracelet, I'm using a 0.8mm wire, and it's just a regular round wire. And this is just a couple colour, but you can also choose whatever colour you want. That's your design choice. And then for the beads, what I like to use for this bracelet is rondelles. And this is just because I think they give a really nice effect to the bracelet. You don't have to use rondelles, it can be maybe rounds or something else. You can just experiment with that. But these measure a 4 by 6mm, and these are just some blue coloured glass beads. And then you'll just need a selection of your basic pliers. So get your things together and then let's get started. So the first thing we want to do is we want to cut our wires ready. And now first you want to cut 3 lengths, and these are going to be a shorter lengths, and they're about 40 centimeters each. And these are going to be the ones that are running through your bracelet. And then you'll also need to cut 1 long length of your wire, of the same wire, and this long length needs to be about 2 meters long. And this will be what we'll be using to make the macrame. So cut your wires. And then what I'll be working on is my macrame board, which has these notches going all the way around. So that makes it easier to do macrame work and that. And I'll be using it as well when I'm using my wire. If you don't have this, you can just find another way of attaching your work for you to be able to work with it. So there's ways of doing that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my 3 shorter lengths of wire, and I'm going to attach them to my board. One of these notches, and just all 3 together, and just put them in there, leaving just a little bit of tail on the other side, like so. And then just make sure you keep them like as straight as possible, and I'm going to straighten them out, feed them all the way to the bottom, and then also attach them on the bottom of my board, like so. And then I'm just going to put my board down again, and they're now ready for me to work with. So the next thing we want to do is we want to get a long length of wire out and then attach it to these, because we're going to be making this little macrame piece before we start adding in the beads. And then also then the long length of wire is attached to here, so we can continue working with it. Now all you do is you get one end of that long length, feed it underneath the wires that you've already got attached on your board, and then you want to find about the middle. So what I do is I put it under, and then grab the 2 ends, put the ends of your wire together, and then kind of pull them up, and then the middle would be right under the wires you've already got on your board. And then you know that that's about the middle, so you want that roughly to stay underneath these 3 wires. So now what we'll need to do is start making our first macrame knot. And we do this the exact same way as we would do it with cord. So we get one end of our wire first. It doesn't matter which side you start with, that's just personal preference. I personally always start with my left side, that's just what comes natural to me. And then put that over first, over all the other wires on your board. Now the only difference when you do macrame with wire rather than cord is you just need to be a little bit more careful how you handle the wire, because obviously cord you can kind of do what you want to it. It won't kink and bend or break really, whereas the wire you want to try and keep it in curves and avoid getting kinks and bends in it. So just be gentle with it. So you put one side over, and then you get the other end that's coming out from the other side, and then put that over the one you just put over in the first place, and then underneath everything in the middle, and then up through the loop that you created with the other wire. And then just pull that through. Now the beginning here is just going to be the most difficult part because it's not yet tightened down to your work. That's what we're doing now. But also you've got very long lengths to work with. But just take your time and you'll be fine. And then we just need to tighten it. Like so. And then with wire, just pull it nice and tight. The wire's not going to break on you. But you want to make sure you get a nice and even knot throughout your whole piece. So that's 1/2 of the knot. And then I'm going to do the other side of it. So you do the same thing but reverse. So you take the wire from the other side, bring that over first, and then take the opposite wire end over the first one, and then underneath everything in the middle and up through the loop. And then you've already got your first one attached, which makes it a little bit easier now. And then you just tighten that up right under the other one, like so. Make sure you pull nice and tight. And what I like to do when I'm making my knots is kind of, to avoid getting too many bends and kinks in it, kind of, as I'm pulling the knot, work my way outward to make sure I keep that curve and smooth the wire off. So that's your first knot, and you just want to make a few of these. Now on here I've made 3 knots before I start adding in my beads. So make 3 of these knots and then we'll start adding in the beads. So I've now made my 3 knots of the first macrame piece we'll be doing, and then now it's time to start adding on our beads to the middle strands. So I'm just going to release these from the bottom, and then we want to start putting on beads. Now what you'll find is your 3 wires in the middle, they'll kind of be lying side by side, and what you want is you want 1 more bead in the middle strand than on the 2 outer ones. So I have now finished adding all my beads to my strands of wire, and what I have specifically is I have 20 beads on the 2 outside strands, and then I have 21 on the middle one. So like I said, just make sure you have 1 extra bead on the middle one, but obviously you might find that you need a different amount depending on the size, because you can always add more or less beads depending what you need for your size. So now I need to start adding on, wrapping around the beads. And then before I start weaving around my beads, I'm just going to get my wires into position. Now what I do is, I grab one side first, I just take my left one, and this is the coming out of the end of your very last knot, and I just slide it under all the middle strands of wire, so the 3 strands of wire you have in the middle, and just slide it under there, all the way, and I just pull it tight. It's just to get it across over to the other side. And so your wires are basically coming from behind to start doing the wrap around the beads. And then I do the same with the other one. Take the end of that one and put that underneath as well. It's the opposite way. And pull it all the way through. Nice and tight, like so. So basically your wires are switched places. And I just like to do this because I think it gives a neater look once we start weaving around the beads. And to do that, I'm actually going to take my work off of my board now, because I'm going to be doing this holding it in my hands. So you just take your wires off of your board, and now obviously remember that your beads are on them strands and they're loose still. So if you just kind of tip this upside down, your beads will come straight off of your wires. So just be gentle when you take it off to make sure you don't lose your beads off of your wires and all over the floor. So I've taken off all my length of wire now, and I'm going to turn this around to a position where I can work with it comfortably. And then first I'm going to just scooch up my beads a bit, because what I want is for them to sit as close up below the final knot as they can. And that means that the two outer wires, where you have the fewer beads on, I'm just going to separate them from the top one a little bit, because basically the top one is going to kind of lie on top of the other two in the middle. So something roughly like this. Obviously everything is still loose. Just make sure that all your beads are in the correct place, like so. So you just basically bend your bottom wires down a little bit, or the top wire up, just to give it space there for your beads. And scoot your beads up, and then kind of lie all the strands into position as good as you can, because obviously everything is still loose. So just do it gently and be careful you don't lose all your beads. And now it's time to start wrapping our long pieces of wire around the beads. So now to start wrapping around the beads. Now what you want to be aware of obviously is your wires where your beads are on is still loose. There's nothing at the other end attaching there or stopping it, so beads can still come off. So what you can do is you can either put a little loop on all of the 3 strands of wire, just so in case if the beads fall down, at least they won't come off of the wire. Or what I normally do is I just kind of hold my work a bit of an angle upward on this end, and that's how I normally work with it. So just to make sure that they don't come off, and then I just kind of gently bend my wires upward a little bit as well, the ends of them. So that's how I like to work, but you can put loops on there, like I said, if you want to, just to feel a bit more secure. And then we're going to start with one of the wires, so a wire on one side. It doesn't really matter which one you start with, as long as you stay consistent throughout. But I'm just going to start with the bottom one. And then what we're going to do is we want to catch our first few beads. And to do that, basically all we do is wrap around. So we want to skip the first one on the side that the wire is coming from, and then go around and catch the one on the top, and then on the other side you want to catch just one as well. Like so. So you're catching these 2 top beads, the top one in the middle and then the top one on the other side. And the first part here is just the most fiddly because obviously everything is loose. But that's why you kind of, if I do this bracelet with cord, which I have a tutorial on as well, I do it on the board, but because it's with wire, I feel like I kind of have to do it in my hand, because if I do it on the board, the whole thing gets a bit too tight and then we won't be able to bend it at the end. So this helps to give that little bit extra space or air between the beads, if you can say. So we've done the first wrap there, and then we'll come back around the back, straight across the back, and then below the first bead on this other side. And then to wrap around again, we go across at an angle again to capture these beads. So basically it's a row of beads each time. The top we're just catching the one in the middle and the one on the opposite side, and then we're just going down 1 bead each time we do a wrap from then on, like so. And you don't want to be doing this too tight, like I said, because then you won't be able to bend the bracelet at the end. And you also want to make sure you kind of leave space in between your beads. So try not to bunch your beads up too close, which is what would really happen if you do it on the board. So that's a couple of wraps with this first one, and then what I'm going to do is just go to the other side, because I like doing them as I go. So I don't do a full one all the way down first, I kind of do them both following each other. Just make sure everything is in place and do that throughout as you go. But then you take this one, coming from the other side, and do exactly the same thing, just opposite. So again, you want to capture the very first one in the middle, and then the very first one on the opposite side. And then get your wire underneath. Now again, it's just a little bit tricky. The only tricky part really is because your wires are quite long. But if you sat with space around you, it's going to make it easier. Like so. So that's the first wrap with that wire. So as you can see right at the top, we're going to have a wire crossing over each other, and crisscross there. And then again, when you come around the back, make sure you come straight across the back. So you go one bead down on the side that you started from, and then wrap around again to cross over the wire again. So every time you move down one bead when you're doing your wrap, you're crossing your wires over in the middle row basically. And then before I kind of move this across the back, I'm going to continue with the other one, so I'll keep going back and forth between my wire. So this is the first one we started with. Wrapping that around. Going one bead down on each strand of wire every time, and then straight across the back. Like so. And then I go back to this one again. So basically I do one wrap at a time and then have the second wire just follow the other one. So wrap and then straight across the back. Like so. And again, your wires are crossing over, making sure you catch all the right beads. And try and make sure as you go things are even. It's better adjusting things as you go, as you're making the wraps, rather than going back. Because once you wrapped all the way down, all the beads are kind of in place, locked in place. So rather check things as you go, make sure everything looks right, sits right, and that you have some space in there, in between your beads and your wire, to move the bracelet around a little bit. So just continue like this until you've used up all your beads, and then I'll show you how we finish off. So I've now kept wrapping just like I explained and showed, and I've reached the end now to where I don't have any more beads left. And then I'm going to show you how we then secure the last bead in place and then finish off the bracelet. So as you can see, been crisscrossing all the way down until we reach the end, and we have the very last bead in the middle, which is still technically loose, but the others are kind of captured in place. And then what we're going to do now is finish off this end with a macrame piece as well to match the other end. So first off, just to mirror the other end, I'm going to bring these wires around as if I was going to do another wrap. But I'm just going to cross them over at the back basically, because we now want to get them into position where we can start the macrame on this end. And as you can see as well on the back, just to show you, this is what the back looks like. So all the way across down the back you have the wires crossing over straight across, and on the front they're crisscrossing over each other. So just to show you, that's the effect you get. And now what I'm going to do to finish off with the macrame piece, I'm going to reattach it to my board just because it's a little bit easier to work with. So reattach my middle 3 strands to my board just like I did in the beginning, and we now have the rest of our wrapping strands, the long ones. And all we're going to do is, it's gotten a lot easier now because there's not as long a length left on them. But we're just going to do the exact same thing. So make a macrame knots. Make sure you start with the same side as you did previously. So I start with my left side, bring that over all your middle strands, and then I take the wire from the other side, bring it over the one you just put over first, and then underneath everything in the middle, and then up through the loop you created. So you get your very basic square macrame knot. Before you tighten it, you just want to make sure that it's sitting right in place up here, because it might move a little bit. So like that. And then you can always just hold it down with your finger to make sure that when you tighten this, that it'll move as little as possible. And so just tighten it gradually, nice and tight. And just manoeuvre it a bit if you need to. The first one is just the most difficult one, just because we need to get them in place. So that's the first half of the first square knot. So now I'm going to finish it off by doing the other side of it. So just start from the opposite side. Make sure everything is tight before you tighten the other half. Like so. And make sure you pull them nice and tight to get them even knots all the way. And just to do the same thing as on the other end, I'm just going to do the 3 knots on here as well. If you've done more or less knots, then just do the same thing. So I finished off my little macrame section, and now what we have to do is finish off the actual bracelet and then the ends of whatever wire we have left. So I'm going to take my bracelet off the board again, because we're done with all the macrame and all that. And what we need to do now basically first is get rid of these excess ends of wire that we've used to do macrame and wrap around with. And then the way I do that is just using our middle 3 strands, and I've just started with one side. It doesn't matter which side you start with, but what I do is I take it around the back and then just wrap it around these 3 wires in the middle, like so. So it's coming back towards the front. And then you need to get some wire cutters or flush cutters, whatever you have. And then I'm going to cut this excess wire off, because this will hold it in place. You can do an extra wrap around if you want to. I'm just trying to not bulk it up too much. So cut that off, like so. And then the same thing with the other side. I take that around the back, wrap it around the 3 wires in the middle. Make sure to keep it as nice and tight together as you can. And then take my wire cutters again and cut off the excess. And now you'll notice that I'm finishing off these ends at the front, and I'll be doing that with all the ends. And that's simply because what you want to always try and make sure to do when you're making wire work is when you finish off your ends, make sure that the ends don't catch or scratch on anything, whether it's skin or clothes or something. And you would think that finishing them at the front is not the best idea, but I'm going to actually be covering this up at the end. So that's why I'm going to finish them at the front, and so there's nothing on the back that's lying against the skin to scratch or anything. And then what I'm just going to do with these ends that are cut off, just take my flat nose or chain nose pliers and just squeeze them down. So also you run your fingers over and you can't actually really feel anything. And then they're nicely and securely in place, like so. And then what there's left to do is actually make the clasp part. But what you'll see is that we have the 3 wires left on each end that are running through the middle of the bracelet, holding all the beads. Now that's a little bit too many to make the clasp, so I need to get rid of 2 of them, so I'm just left with 1. So I'm going to make sure that I leave the middle one of them, and that's going to be the one that I'm going to use to make the clasp. And then the other ones, I'm just going to take one at a time, bend it down to an angle, just to basically where it's coming out from. And then also I'm going to wrap this around the other two, like so, just about once. You can do it twice if you want to. And then do the same thing, go in, cut the excess off. I'm just going to squeeze down the end with my chain nose pliers. And again, that gets squeezed nicely so you can't feel anything. And if you can still feel it a bit, just squeeze it a bit more, like that. And then I'm going to take the one from the other side and bend that down as well. And then go around the back the opposite way. Come back to the front. And this is just wrapping around the one wire we have left. And then cut this off at the front, like so. And again, just squeeze that end down. And there now, we are just left with this one wire that I'm going to use to make the clasp. And then obviously at the other end, you're also left with the 3 wires. You just want to do the same thing I just showed you to get rid of the outer 2. So we're just left with the middle one. Now I've got rid of all the excess wire, and I'm left with these that I need to make the clasp with. And then on one end, you'll need to make a loop, and on the other end, a hook. And it doesn't matter which end you do what. The only thing I'll say, if you have one length that's a bit longer left, I'll probably suggest you use that for the hook, as that uses a bit more wire. So what I'm going to do is on this end I'll be making the hook. So I get my flat nose or chain nose pliers out, and I'm going to go up. How much is up to you. How far you go up depends, that determines how large your hook is going to be really. So I just go up maybe 4-5 centimeters or so, and then bend it back on itself. Like so. So bend it back on itself, so it's coming back down next to itself. And then this bend, I'm just going to take my pliers and squeeze it to get the bend as tight as possible. So something like this. So you don't really have a space in there. You can if you want to. I just like making it as tight as possible. And then making sure that your wire is straight when you do this, so that your hook becomes straight. I'm going to take the rest of this wire and then bend it down like this. Use my pliers so I make sure I get a fairly nice bend. And then what I'm going to do is keep hold of it and then start wrapping it around. You need to make sure you bend it just a little bit above so you have a bit of space there to wrap on. And try and make sure that everything stays straight as you're doing this. And take the tail and wrap it around your wire. And this is basically a bit like doing a wrap loop, because doing these wraps is going to secure it in place. Just do it gently, wrap it around. I like to do it roughly about 3 times or so. So one more. Basically just fill up that space that you've left until you reach where you have your other ends of your wire finished. Make sure your wraps are nice and tight and even. Something like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a spiral with the rest of this wire. So depending how much you got left, if it's just the right amount that you need, you can just spiral the rest of the length. If you need to cut something off, you can just cut a little bit off to shorten the length of it. And then what you need to get out is your round nose pliers for this. And then how you spiral it is really personal preference. Mine is coming from the back now and towards the front here. I'm actually just going to wrap it one more time over to the other side, like so. I prefer my spiral coming from the top basically, because then I'm going to take my round nose pliers, and how you want your spiral is really your personal choice. I like mine quite tight, so I'm going to get as far to the tip as my round nose as I can, to the very tip of my wire, and then start spiraling it. You can see I've started the spiral there, and then you just keep going. And because I like the tight spiral, I'm going to make sure that my wire is right next to each other as I'm spiraling it, and you can move over to your flat nose or chain nose pliers to help keep spiraling there. And this is the spiral that we're then going to use to cover up the ends that I was speaking about before. You keep spiraling it until you reach right about here, where the spiral pretty much sits right above the rest of your work, right on top of it. And then right now it's sticking out a little bit. All I do is I press it down. And just use my fingers for this, like so it's nice and flat. And then that's covered up all these ends that you've left and made a nice neat finish. And all that's left to do is your hook, well, it's going to turn into your hook, is now straight. All you want to do is just shape this. So I just get my round nose pliers out for this. You can use something else if you want to. About the middle of this length, bend this back, or you can bend it towards the front, that's your personal choice. So you have something like this. And then what I like to do is just kink out the very tip like so. So it gets that hook shape that you're going to use to then put into the loop at the other end. So that's one end finished. And then before I make the loop on the other end, I'm just going to start bending my bracelet just slightly, just to avoid any problems when doing that. Because you might find that when you're bending it, that it might pull on this middle wire a little bit, because that's what's going through the whole bracelet. So just to bend it slightly, to get it roughly in shape, so that you avoid having made both the loop and the lock, and then you might end up with a problem. So that's fine for now. So I've roughly bent that into shape now, just so it has a bit of a curve to it. And then what I want to start doing on this end, to finish off the bracelet completely, is the loop that the hook needs to go into. So what you need to do is just go above the ends of your finished off wires a couple of millimeters or so, and then bend this wire back on itself, and then you just get something that has the size and the shape that you want your loop to be. Now make sure you bend this to the side. You can either use a pen or something, it doesn't really matter, something round if you want a round loop. I'm just going to go in with my bail making pliers and choose the size that I want it to be, and place them right above where I made the bend, and then get my wire, the rest of it, all the way around until it comes back out on the other side like this. And then you can switch over to using your flat nose pliers or something, or chain nose. Hold on to your loop, or you can hold on to it with your hands or fingers if you want to. And then start doing the wrap loop again. to secure this in place. Do nice and tight wraps, about 2 or 3, like so. And then because my length that I have left is quite short, I don't need to cut anything off to make the spiral. So I'm just going to get my round nose pliers out and start making the spiral just like I did on the other end, to again help finish off the bracelet and cover up all the other ends that we finished off previously. So make the spiral, should change to some flat nose or chain nose pliers. Finish off the spiral all the way in till it lies right above the rest of your work. And then if it's sticking out a little bit, just press it down so it sits right on top of your finished off ends. And then if you need to adjust it, obviously you can do that. And your final adjustments. And then it's time to get your bracelet into proper shape. And you just do that gently with your hands. Do a bit at a time. Don't go one place and make a big bend. Go gently back and forth, do a bit at a time. And as you can see, this is where you needed the space in between the beads and that to be able to bend it, because if you made it too tight you wouldn't be able to bend the bracelet properly, because basically the beads and the wire would just get in the way of being able to do that. Do something like this, and then you use the loop and the hook for the security part of it, and there you have your finished bracelet. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching. Hello there everyone. Today I want to show you how to make this 3D triple row goddess macrame bracelet. And this is what it looks like. So it looks like this from the side, and then from the front you have this effect going across. This is why I call it a 3D effect, because I kind of feel like, because of the